Konnichiwa! It seems like Japan is here to help end the Canada-US trade war, and Canada needs all the help it can get, especially as the US is lashing out at Canada again today, as they should, based on their trade negotiation strategies and some of the flip-flopping that's going on. And that flip-flopping has to be called out because it seems like the clock is ticking as we get more information that other countries are trying to be competitive to replace Canada in some of these negotiations. But luckily, some of Canada's biggest banks have made some huge changes, which could be good long-term. But on top of all of the news we got today, Doug Ford made a hilarious purchase. The timing is amazing. We also have a clip at the end of the video that shows exactly how Canada ended up in the position that it is with our propaganda media. Oh my goodness, there's a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's get into it. All right, so getting into these clips here, we did see Canada getting called out, but this is the discussion, and I'm surprised nobody else has mentioned these comments. They're all fixated on the Canada sucks comments. However, he says something really important here. He also, we talked about something that was from yesterday's video too, but the Japan stuff, I think, needs to be looked at more, how important this is.
Kick off next month. There are voices in China who want to see Chinese investment in the U.S. and specifically JV BYD factories in the United States. Is that on the table?
No.
Thank you for that answer. I have like 3 more questions I can get in now. Amazing.
So I wanted to keep that part in because it's important for context too. Like, this is how confident, this is how clear the US is being. They don't want the BYD vehicles in their market. They are not going to allow it. They're intentionally going to try and block it. For some reason, Canada, who's got more warnings today, which we'll talk about, still wants to stay committed to working with BYD and allowing them into our market, which is very dumb when we can see how important Japan, Honda, Toyota, all those companies are going to be. And we did cover yesterday how Ford was talking about how they needed to be more like the Chinese companies. Then we got this update today, so we will be going back to that clip, but I just found this really funny, that Ford is recalling about 1.4 million F-150 pickup trucks in the U.S. after a NHTSA investigation into reports of unexpected downshifts, with dealers set to update software as a remedy. Well, Ford, you want to work with the Chinese? You want to be more like those companies? And you want to have your joint ventures with BYD? BYD specifically, the company you asked about, and now you got another major recall going on. You know what, Ford? I was going to buy millions of F-150s for the natives once they signed the deal to shut up. Maybe that deal's off. I think we're going to have to move it to Toyota.
I've been talking to a lot of your counterparties, other countries. I'm curious, which countries and which negotiators, which teams do you feel like understand the U.S.? Who has been best to work with? Who's been worst to work with?
Well, the Japanese were extraordinary to work with because we have a great cultural divide. And once you understand the cultural divide, and we're willing to put it on the table, you can't open the Japanese car market. You just can't. There's 94% of cars driven in Japan are Japanese. It's cultural, right? The only American cars sold in Japan are Chevys driven by the Yakuza. So if your kid comes home with a Chevy, it's not really going to work for you, right?
A lot of people don't know this, but there's like a ton of subcultures in Japan that just love Americana. Like, if you go to some areas of Japan, for those of you who don't know, I lived in Japan for a very short amount of time, and you would see like these car meetups and these other things. It would be like American Muscle and all that stuff. There's like cholos there. Japan is an interesting place. Anyway, side note.
Right? So once you realize that's not going to open, then we had to come at it with a completely different model, right? The tariff was going to be 25%, or we've got to come up with a different model. And so they came up with a model that said, we will invest with you in America.
And this is buying down the tariff in some sense?
Not in some sense. We reduced the tariff from 25% to 15%.
Yeah.
Right? In exchange for that, they gave us $550 billion to do construction projects that are absolutely going to get them their money back.
Who else gets it from your perspective? The British, the South Koreans,
So before we move on from that, he talked about how important it was for them to get that deal done. And they basically needed Japan to buy down that tariff because he said otherwise the tariff was going to be 25%. And people don't realize how massive Japanese automakers are to the North American economy, not just the US economy, the North American economy. Like he's talking about 500 billion in investments over a bunch of years, but they also are worth like over $200 billion annually in GDP spread out between, Canada and the US. Over 200 billion annually in just economic production from essentially two companies, Honda and Toyota. So both countries really want to keep Honda and Toyota happy because they've got manufacturing all over the place, but the supply chain between Canada and the US with those two companies is so integrated, it is so connected. And we've seen Toyota and Honda, generally speaking, are pretty loyal companies from not wanting to close factories, not wanting to move to other countries unless they specifically have to. They generally keep their operations in an area once they've set up. And they're in both Canada and the US. So yes, what is most likely based on what we're seeing is they do plan on opening more of their new facilities inside of the US. So chances are all expansion, all growth, everything like that is being done in the US. We expect that. That's probably what's coming. But they don't want to move super integrated, established supply chain, everything that they have set up in Canada. They don't want to move those operations. So they want the least amount of tariff friction that is possible. So I think we're going to be seeing pressure. We saw, obviously, they had a lot of negotiating power in dealing with the US. My three favorite countries in the world are Canada, America, and Japan. So I'm happy for them to be involved in these negotiations and be like, hey, we want to make this work. We want to get this trade deal done and negotiated so that both countries are on the same page because we don't want to break up our supply chain. And we're not done with Lutnick's statements. I just wanted to show this because now Honda and Toyota are forming a coalition, essentially a new lobby group to put more pressure on the government. This is to put more pressure on the Canadian side so that they can stop flip-flopping, which we'll also get into, and hopefully we can get this deal wrapped up.
A new lobby group has been established working on behalf of Japanese companies building vehicles in southern Ontario. Toyota and Honda have combined to form the Pacific Manufacturing Association of Canada. The two companies accounted for about 3/4 of vehicles produced in Canada last year. Toyota's Canadian plants are in Woodstock and Cambridge. Honda makes vehicles in Alliston. The new association comes amid manufacturing struggles under U.S. tariffs and preparations for new North American trade agreement negotiations.
I think everybody anticipates that this is going to be one of the most dynamic years for the economy, for the
Brendan is very happy about this.
The automotive industry, for trade negotiations. And so we need all hands on deck, and we need people pulling in the same direction. And
yes, we need all hands on deck. We need people pulling in the same direction. And we can see Canada is being annoying because happy as we were yesterday about supply management, it seems like that's getting flip-flopped because of frickin' Quebec. But anyways, they are obviously going to be way more involved in these trade negotiations. And I'm hoping it's because they want to keep their operations in Canada. This seems like a net benefit for everybody. Like, hey, look, we are going to keep all of our expansions in the US, but we want to keep our operations in Canada. And I'd love to see that. But anyways, he does, kind of make fun of Canada here coming up as he explains some of the countries that are doing better.
Well, it was hard for the Europeans, but they got there. The big deals, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Europeans, and the UK, they got there.
Yeah.
Right? They got there and they understood. Didn't mean it wasn't a lot of talking, but obviously, even in this brief time we have together, you realize I'm not really shy about talking.
Is President Trump, speaking our closer neighbors, is President Trump committed to extending the USMCA ahead of the July deadline?
I think he thinks it's a bad deal. Right? He thinks making Mexico and Canada be treated economically like Georgia and Alabama without them actually being committed.
Do you think it might lapse?
Is a bad trade deal.
The former.
I think it needs to be reconsidered and reimagined correctly. There are parts of Mexico that are fundamental to us. There are parts of Canada, their energy and other things that are important to us. But
there you go. Hey, we'll take what we can get. Wait, he finally, for once, we got some, it's important. And this is important on the Canadian side. And I've always said it from a benefit, from a positive perspective. Canada could be the partner bringing all of the energy to the table. And we could be producing, we do not have an issue in Canada with producing more oil. It's always been a supplying more oil because we refuse to allow these infrastructure expansions and all of these things that we could have easily been focused on and working more with the US, making us more indispensable to the US in a good way. Because I still see people online, even I still don't get it. I just watched another video. Actually, Canada's really integral to the U.S. energy supply, and if we shut off our oil to the U.S., aka shut off Canada's entire baseline economy, they would really be hurting. Sure, I wonder what pain we would feel if we did that.
But the concept of taking an auto plant out of Ohio and Michigan and putting it in Mexico to break the union and to break our people is nuts. It was a bad industrial policy. It harmed America. President Trump is going to fix it. He's bringing it back. You're going to see it get brought back. And I think it needs to be reimagined and needs to be readdressed. There's plenty of good in it, but there's a huge amount of bad in it and needs to be reconsidered for the benefit of America.
The former top Canadian trade negotiator said the other day that time is on...
Krista Freeland, who's like the worst?
No, a guy.
I love that Chrystia Freeland is still catching strays. That lady sucks. She helped run Canada into the ground. Her and Justin Trudeau, I think, need to be tried through the court systems. I think they could possibly, be facing some capital punishment legally through the court systems. I'm not calling for anything separate, just legally through the court systems, perhaps because of the damage that they did to Canada over the last 10 years.
I'm blanking on his name here, but the time is on our side because the pressures on the U.S. are only going to increase over time. Basically, you guys are in political trouble. The longer they wait, the better a deal you're going to have to do.
Good for them. That is like the worst strategy I've ever heard. They suck. Look, we are a $30 trillion economy, right? We are the consumer of the world, okay? Carney has a problem with us. He gets on a plane and he goes to China. Does he think the Chinese economy is going to buy his stuff? China is entirely an export-driven economy, right? So what did he do? He came back and said, oh, we'll take their electric cars. I mean, is this nuts?
We are close.
So nuts, so stupid, and it made me so mad, that he has to warn Canada again, and Canadians are like, actually, Chinese EVs are pretty tight, when we have so many industry experts, security experts, all of these people warning how dumb this is. We know we want to keep Toyota and Honda happy, and potentially they're working as the intermediary to help Canada and the US get this trade deal done. But here's this article that the massive risk from the Chinese EVs are the first test for Canada's new strategic partnership with China. The deal with China was less welcomed by auto manufacturers who argue it will undercut Canadian auto industry and workers. And when they get into the numbers here, it's a massive risk, said Brian Kingston, president and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Canada's auto industry depends on our integration with North America, and he's saying in the U.S. specifically. That's been the foundation of the sector going all the way back to the Auto Pact. And for all of the liberals who somehow think this is a good idea, an estimated hourly wage at a Chinese manufacturer is between $2 and $4 an hour, said Kingston. Compare that to a unionized vehicle production plant in Canada, where your average wage is about $45 an hour, and that also includes pensions, benefits, and a whole range of other advantages. So this China deal is shaping up to be all risk and very little reward, but we know we just can't trust these liberals and their flip-flopping, and that's why when you can see the U.S. continuously getting annoyed, and we'll just wait them out, and we'll do this on the Canadian side, and then they're just going to burn themselves out, and they'll be in trouble because they can't deal with us. So we covered this yesterday. Canada presses for wider trade agreement in talks with the U.S., and this absolute idiot was out there saying, LeBlanc said Canada is ready and willing to resolve issues raised by the U.S. Trade Representatives Jameson Greer, including Canada's supply-managed dairy system and regulations affecting major U.S. technology firms. We talked about it yesterday. I was happy to hear that they were willing to go after supply management, and then less than 24 hours later, liberals vow to protect dairy supply management in the U.S. trade talks despite pressure. This sucks! I was happy for about 18 hours thinking that we were going to go after supply management. I thought it was possible. I thought it was possible that Canada would be willing to make a good decision for once. Remember, Canada has the highest dairy cost in essentially the developed world, so Canadians' prices continue to go up, but we got to protect supply management. We just got to, and the worst part is almost, not all of, but almost all of the supply management pressure comes out of stinky little Quebec, and we have to deal with them. They always threaten to leave, and they constantly say they're going to separate. Guys, we're begging you. please separate, especially with the information we're going to get into later with all of the Atlantic provinces and how basically Alberta is subsidizing the entire east coast of Canada as that east coast is shutting down Alberta. Alberta's got to go too, evidently, but it'll only be a benefit for Alberta. Quebec would be getting lit up, but here we are. He's specifically saying they're not going to touch it.
Is it moving forward? So is it going forward? When will this be resolved? Because we're up against a wall. Yes, I understand. And yes, it is moving forward. I can assure you of that.
One pathetic sob story later.
Will supply management be sacrificed? Absolutely not. Is that confirmed? That is confirmed.
So the reason that Chick was talking there is because these bozos are talking in Francais, but we have actually an infographic of how the Liberals are helping Canada right now. So getting into this infographic here's a perfect, just visualization of the Liberal government and their announcements on how they are going to help Canadians, because this is the MOU. The MOU that was announced for Alberta when they said, oh, we're really going to get you this pipeline. We're really here to help. They're reaching out their hand and people keep climbing up the ladder and they move the goalpost and they push everything back. And now we've already missed the first deadline for the MOU. No updates on that. And it's going to be pushed back even more because the Liberals pretend to help. This is why I'm saying they're not dumb. They're evil. They're nefarious. They're doing this on purpose. Like, that person knows he's turning the crank to not help that person. So this is what makes me so mad when, well, we got the MOU. And people keep saying, well, they guaranteed a pipeline with the MOU. They did not guarantee it. Anyways, we do have Heather Exner-Pirot calling these things out, which is good. And she's responding to this article here, but just getting into the blurb that she shared. People are losing faith that the Liberal government will actually fix any of the structural problems they created in the last 10 years. They created the problems. They're trying to work around their own problems that they created. They created the issues, and they're like, we just can't figure out a solution to this. I don't understand. Next quote, start building, or better yet, just get out of the effing way. A little editorializing there on my part. We need to see a clear and concise directions from the feds. They're not doing it. They're going to continue to hold back, divide their focus, because this is the project that keeps really getting pushed. Oh, Ottawa wants LNG to be shipped from the Port of Churchill by 2030, Manitoba Premier says. And I kept talking about this meeting yesterday. Oh, it was so productive. And the Port of Churchill is not even something that should be on the top of the... It's a good... Like, long-term, it's a project for sure that we should focus on. But we have actionable projects that they're holding back in place right now. And by 2030, yeah, good luck. Especially with, again, Heather calling this out. No proponent, no submissions, no permits, no investment, no engineering, no consultation, no pipeline, no terminal, no LNG trains, no off-taker, no supply, no ice-strengthened LNG carrier fleet, which is why I'm saying in the long term, as the Arctic starts to open up more, that will make sense. But because we have to wait a while before that's going to be like a normalized port that could be used year-round, and it's when you get into all the Hudson, anyways, doesn't matter. We're not going to be able to use that port by 2030 in any meaningful way. That is a pipe dream, and it's a distraction. It's a waste of taxpayer time and dollars when there's actual projects that could be worked on and instituted right now. Respectfully, Manitoba should focus on how to produce more things global customers want. Churchill is sucking up too much oxygen. And that's the thing when you spin too many plates at once in a country that already struggles to get any projects done. We just talked about that mining project a couple videos ago that I bought the shares in that was supposed to be getting expedited because they were going to an existing site. They were told their permits would only take 80 days because the government's putting in these new fast approvals and they should have been ready to work on an existing site, and they still don't have approval. And they talked about getting approved in 80 days last summer. That's how far behind and how hard it is to get a project done. So the idea that we could have the Port of Churchill operational, shipping LNG, any of this stuff by 2030 is very dumb. But just another quick example as to why that 2030 goal would be a little, let's say, optimistic. This from Kirk here, Kirk Lubimov. Finland and Canada decided to purchase fighter jets around the same time. Finland will be fully ready to go and trained by 2030. Canada will just finish putting tampons in men's bathrooms by 2034. How is Canada so incompetent in every single thing? And we've got this here. This was one of the ministers today talking about the purchases of the F-35s. Both countries bought them at the same time.
Finland and Canada made the decision to purchase new fighter jets around the same time in 2022. Finland, a country of about 5 million people, decided to purchase some 65 F-35 jets. Canada, a country of 40 million people, decided to purchase roughly 88 of these fighter jets.
So that off the top there is just crazy. Like 5 million people, which would be, so we're 8 times their population in Canada right now. 8 times, and we bought 23 more jets. 8 times the population, we bought 23 more jets.
And Finland's fighter jets will be fully operational, including all the pilot training and bases up and running, including in their Arctic region, by 2030. The Auditor General has said that at the earliest, Canada's program of training pilots and upgrading bases would be ready in 2034.
There you go. Canada's crushing. We're moving at speeds not seen in generations. We're going to be a military powerhouse. We know we've got this new defense investment strategy. We're doing all this important stuff, but getting crushed by Finland at the same time. And I think on the private side of things, companies are finally waking up to how important this is and how the timeline has started. It is a ticking economic time bomb for Canada to get the trade negotiations done, but also get out of our own way in approving projects, which includes shutting down all of the green nonsense that has been holding back Canada for a decade. RBC Scotiabank scrap emissions targets for oil and gas lending. Can you imagine that? We were holding back our oil and gas sector from even being able to access financing, being able to access funding because of green legislations not done even in our own country. It was from other countries. RBC and Bank of Nova Scotia have abandoned plans to reduce the carbon footprint association with loans to heavy emitters. The bank cited the geopolitical and energy security context as reasons for withdrawing their 2030 financial emissions targets. RBC will retain its 2050 ambition to achieve net zero emissions. Sure, dude. While Scotiabank has retired that goal altogether. Yeah, this is just being kept on because it's so far away and they know they're like, things will be changed by 2050. So we can say we're, on board there. Why I'm saying, again, it's a time bomb is because we continue to see they're starting to understand if we do not get these projects started, approved, set up, we are going to be so far behind. And all of these other countries down in Latin America are now saying, hey, US, maybe we'll start approving all these projects. Why don't you start working with us? Putting out articles like this, look to Latin America's oil boom for energy security. Ruh-roh. Something tells me author Juan Pablo Spineto is a little biased here. Get out of here. We're going to Canada for our oil and gas. Juan Pablo Spineto, you little son of a gun. But understanding how bad Canada has been managing its job sector, our investments. We're finding out that the last 10 years that everybody's calling the lost decades, which was the, completely shaped and controlled by the Liberals. They take all of the blame. There is nobody else who can be blamed outside of those stinky libs. And they created 1 million government jobs over that 10 years, outpacing all of the private sector jobs. And Alberta's essentially paying for all of it.
Between 2015 and 2024, Canada added just shy of 1 million public sector jobs, according to a report from the Fraser Institute. This growth in the public sector during the period outpaced job gains in the private sector. Let's get more from Jason Childs, the author of this report and a professor of economics at the University of Regina. Professor, thanks for joining us. So tell us, is there cause for concern here? I mean, the population was growing.
The population was growing, but again, we're seeing increased dependence on the public sector for employment rather than the private sector. And it's really important to remember the public sector does not fund itself.
The public sector does not fund itself. Taxpayers fund the government, and we continue. It's just, I don't understand how people cannot realize that public sector jobs are not only not economically productive because they don't produce, they are negative because they are taking taxpayer dollars from other. It's crazy to me.
So we're leaning on general private sector taxpayers harder than we were in the past.
What areas in particular? I mean, was it provincial or federal? Did you do a breakdown on that level?
So this work doesn't include that. There is another piece coming out that does include our focus primarily on provincial. The growth is across both. We know that the federal Treasury Civil Service grew by almost 200,000. I don't have that number in front of me right now, but it grew significantly over the same period. massive growth in there as well. But provincial and municipal governments as well have been growing at the same time.
You saw in particular, breaking it down a little more by province, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Quebec, and BC saw...
Oh, Quebec as well, huh? And BC, of course. BC has been exploding when it comes to government jobs. You know, they mentioned Newfoundland there because the whole East, there's 4 provinces out there. I don't know if they should be provinces. Maybe it should just be one. We'll just call it Atlantic Canada province.
The largest gaps between public and private sector job growth, aka the public sector employment expanded at an especially fast rate relative to private.
And listen to this here.
Yeah, so when you look at particularly the Atlantic provinces, Newfoundland in particular, BC saw significant growth as well. Alberta actually managed to sort of hold that back a little bit. And as usual, everybody else falls in between.
There you go. So what he's saying is Alberta was able to keep their public sector jobs down, or at the very least, they were able to outgrow the public sector with private sector jobs. And the other provinces, you know, some of them break even. I'm assuming the Ontarios and whatever of the world. But then the eastern provinces, the public sector, the eastern provinces, I'm sorry, guys. I love you. It's beautiful out there. But notoriously, people are on the pokey. There's been a lot of welfare out there, and now we're seeing the public sector jobs are basically their entire economy. So I don't know. It seems like Alberta's funding a lot of the country, so them leaving would be pretty devastating to Canada. Essentially, it would just destroy Canada entirely. But speaking of provincial and public spending, this story is so funny. Ontario buys a $29 million private jet for Premier Doug, the Liberal slug Ford, because of all his extensive travels. In this video, they say one of the reasons Doug, the Liberal slug, needs a private jet is because he's been making so many trips down to the United States. He's literally been going down to the United States to campaign against Trump's tariffs and campaign against Trump's economic policies. Guys, that is foreign interference. We have been complaining that the U.S. is, doing all the foreign interference. And every time he does something like this, we're justifying a $30 million jet so he can go down and campaign against the president of the United States. That's what we're saying. We are spinning it so that it's $30 million private jet so he can go down and be anti-Trump, anti-American inside of the United States, not in Canada. That's very dumb. But as long as it's, it's anti-Trump, it's a good thing. Of course, to be fair, he has been getting some pushback on that, but it's mostly been through the public's outrage, not through the media. And that's because we have the lovely example of Canada's peak journalism, Canada's peak media apparatus right here. So we have this gentleman named Jane. You figure it out once the video starts to play. And we will see, this is the cutting edge, journalist. And he said some funny stuff in here.
Supporting CBC Radio Canada is vital in protecting cultural sovereignty. Our public broadcaster provides local journalism where private media has withdrawn, reflects communities across the country, and delivers trusted information. Yet ongoing financial uncertainty has resulted in repeated layoffs, reduced local programming, and increased precarity for workers. 92% of our members support increasing CBC Radio Canada funding.
That made me laugh out loud the first time I saw it. So the polling numbers they're using is their own employees. So their own employees, as the argument that Jane is using as to why we should be using more government taxpayer dollars, some more taxpayer dollars to keep Jane's job, to keep Jane in business, to keep the CBC and Radio Canada operating is because 92% of their own employees agree that we should spend more taxpayer dollars on it. So there you go. If that's not an argument that wins you over as to why we should have government-funded media, government-funded mouthpieces, because it's so important that Jane is able to get the stories out there, as later on in the video, we really got to crack down on the speech and campaigns on behalf of censorship and more control, because it's important. We only have the government approved voices because we know the CBC are not journalists. They are just government mouthpieces. And Jane intentionally wants to have more control of all of the independent voices and all of the messaging that gets out. So that's good. We want Jane, this person right here. This is the competent, mentally stable person who should be controlling the messaging that comes out of Canada. Canadians should be bending over backwards right now just to keep Japan happy, specifically, Toyota and Honda, because they are going to be the ones going to bat for us when it comes to the trade negotiations. And we're seeing the U.S. actually listens to Japan because they respect their opinion and they respect their partnership, especially because the Canadian negotiators are going to just flip-flop and make everything worse and be the thorn in America's side until we can get this dealt with. And let's start approving the projects that could be a benefit to the U.S. Fortress America, baby. I think we can do it. Anyways, if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can do it through the link down below. You can also do it directly through YouTube. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.